Chapter 56. The pain that accompanies the happy fate of a man. Steep hills bordered the sides of the large canyon with a passage that was 5 meters wide right down the middle. This kind of location was the best for laying a trap for the wolf riders. Since everyone had agreed with Han Shao-O's plans, they all started busying themselves. Han Shao didn't know much about how to set traps up himself. A group of people first used tough and tinsel ropes to set up tripwires and snares along the passageway. Fanny and Jean then used advanced necromancy magics to release an acid bog behind the tripwires. The acid bog spell was an advanced necromancy spell. It could transform a large area of land into a muddy and miry bog. When the acid bog was formed, it would immediately eat away anyone who ventured within, leaving behind only a pile of bones. This was one of the more diabolic advanced magics of the necromancy major. However, a great deal of mental strength was needed in order to successfully cast the acid bog magic. The acid bog's range would differ according to each necromancer's mental strength. Fanny and Jean had teamed up but only created a bog that measured 5 meters by 5 meters. Judging from how the two of them looked, they were already at their limit. A few large boulders were placed on the top of the hills on both sides, ready to crash down on the arriving orc wolf riders. The bodies of the students and teachers of the necromancy major were all extremely frail and delicate, therefore it was naturally Han Shao who completed the mission of moving the large boulders by himself. After making these preparations, Jean Bellebach and a few others took cover and laid in wait on one side of the passageway. Han Shao, Fanny, Lisa and a few others were in charge of the other hill. "You've changed a great deal now. If we make it back alive to the academy, your contribution will be the greatest. I'll be sure to report this to the school authorities and obtain some rewards for you." Fanny's body was crouched behind a large boulder and patrolled her eyes over Han Shao's body, whispering as she did so. Han Shao was in the middle with Lisa on his left and Fanny on his right. The three were very close together, and when Fanny spoke in a low voice, her breath smelled like the fragrance of orchids and directly breathed onto Han Shao's right cheek. The faint perfume made Han Shao's heart caper like a monkey and mind gallop like a horse. He suddenly felt that this time's danger was also full of gentle charm. He scratched his head out of habit and smiled honestly, turning his head to boldly stare at Fanny's charming features. Fanny's hair was tousled and messy at this moment, and her face was a bit pale after expending quite a bit of mental strength to cast the acid bog. This was in stark contrast to her usual alluring beauty and overbearing air, bringing out another type of beauty for Han Shao to see. "Damn it, I'm talking to you, stop staring at me." Fanny grew angry when she saw that Han Shao was staring at her, mesmerized and not paying any attention to her. "This fellow is becoming even more bold. He even dares stare so insolently at me now." Hey Master Fanny, you're so beautiful. It won't cost you anything if I stare at you, so why must you be so stingy?" Han Shao flirted with a light laugh. A sudden wave of pain traveled from Han Shao's left arm. His face turned wry and he turned his head to cast a glance at Lisa. Upon seeing that Lisa was staring at him viciously, he hastily squeezed out a smile and said, "Of course Lisa, you're also very beautiful, hey." Holding her head high with a light snort, Lisa glared at Han Shao and said huffily, "Don't think that I can't take you down a notch now that you're stronger." "Humphrey, since we have some free time now, hurry and tell me how you came to have mental strength and even mastered the bow and arrow magic. How many secrets have you not told me?" What secrets?" "I could master the bow and arrow magic thanks to you. If it wasn't for you using the agony of the soul and torturing me half to death, I would definitely still be as useless as before. Thanks to you." Her face saddening, Lisa suddenly hung her head and sighed lightly. She said in a low voice, "You still haven't forgiven me. I know you've always hated me for using the agony of the soul on you, but I didn't mean anything by it originally. I didn't know either that it would almost kill you. No, I really don't blame you." "Stop thinking crazy thoughts, Lisa. It's not like you don't know my feelings towards you. How could I hold a grudge against you?" Han Shao started and suddenly remembered his role and hastened to speak words of comfort to Lisa. Just at this moment, Han Shao's right arm also felt the same pain, and he turned his head to see Fanny's slender jade fingers were also forcefully pinching him. A wave of wryness rose from his heart as he sighed silently, thinking that the happy fate of a man was indeed something that couldn't be enjoyed. He asked dryly, Master Fanny, what's wrong now? Fanny also started slightly upon hearing Han Shuo's words and thought, what's wrong with me? What do the two of them talking have to do with me? How come I also couldn't resist the urge to pinch him? She flung her head slightly and also snorted, then pasted a faint smile on her face and raised her voice slightly. Lisa, what did he mean by the bit about his feelings towards you just now? A panicked expression suddenly appeared on Lisa's face as she hurriedly waved her hands in concealment. Nothing. Master Fanny, you must have misheard. Ha, isn't that so, Brian? She didn't forget to throw a threatening glance at Han Shuo in warning after she spoke, indicating that you're dead meat if you dare speak of it. Nodding his head dryly, Han Shu glossed over the matter. He smiled. Yes, Master Fanny must have expended too much mental strength and something must have developed causing interference with your hearing. Is that so? Fanny looked suspiciously at Han Shuo and asked with an odd tone. Of course. Oh right, Master Fanny, when we return to the academy I'd like to remove my status as a slave. I've earned enough gold coins in the dark forest this time and don't want to bear the status of a slave forever. Don't worry, if we can really safely return to the academy this time I will contact the authorities on your behalf. Not only will we remove your status as a slave, but I'm going to remove your status as an errand boy as well. You'll be a student in the necromancy major in the future and I will personally teach you more advanced necromancy magics. With your potential I think your future accomplishments will definitely surpass that of all the current students in the necromancy major. Fanny looked at Han Shuo with gratification and gave him a resolute promise. She thought privately, when he becomes a necromancy major student and if his magic increases rapidly, then he'll be able to truly throw off his current shackles. At that time maybe. What am I think about? Looks like I've truly expended too much mental strength. Otherwise why would I be thinking such crazy thoughts? Han Shuo had an overjoyed expression on his face, but at this moment his brow suddenly furrowed and he closed his eyes, concentrating silently for a moment. He suddenly called out to the other side, Master Jean, be careful, I can already hear dull footsteps. I think the Orcs Wolf Riders will be arriving soon. Understood, you guys need to be careful as well. Brian, Master Fanny and I have just expended a lot of mental strength, so you'll have to protect Master Fanny well. Don't worry, since Master Fanny is by my side, unless I die first, Master Fanny won't suffer a bit of harm. Han Shuo felt more pain on his left arm as soon as he'd finished speaking. He knew immediately that Lisa must have taken action in her anger. He hastily turned his head to the left and explained to Lisa. However, he didn't notice that on his right Fanny's gaze at him at this moment had subtly gained a few hints of complicated emotions. Finally the dull footfalls slowly traveled in from the distance. Even the ordinary students and teachers of the necromancy major had heard those repressed dull sounds and all involuntarily concentrated their attention, fully focused on how to spring the sudden attack afterwards. Damn it, why is it Beecher and the others from the light major? Exclamation mark. Just as everyone was holding their breath and concentration and were about to roll the giant boulders down the hills, Han Shuo's sharp eyes suddenly realized that the incoming people weren't the Orc Wolf Riders but rather Beecher, Irene and the others from the Academy's light major, who happened to be fleeing in stricken, bedraggled panic. A few unfamiliar mages were mixed in and then all rode shrilly whinnying battle steeds that looked like they were about to collapse. Expressions of extreme weariness were on all their faces. Fanny frowned and suddenly poked her head out from behind the giant boulder. Her slender neck stretched out as she yelled loudly, Master Beecher, stop immediately. There are traps here that we've laid down to deal specifically with the Wolf Riders. Beecher and the others hurtling towards the tripwires hastened to stop themselves in that crucial moment after hearing Fanny's words. Beecher lifted his head to look at the necromancy students and teachers on the two sides of the hill and immediately understood the situation. He shouted out, the Orcs Wolf Riders are right behind us. What should we do? Give up the horses and make them continue running, then walk quickly across. We'll tell you where the traps are. Otherwise, if you stay where you are, only death awaits you. Han Shuo stuck out his head and called back calmly. Beecher and the others only hesitated momentarily upon hearing Han Shuo's words and then all moved according to his instructions. They dismounted, used daggers to prick the battle steeds' behinds and rushed them onwards after the horses had been pricked. Following that, their crew frantically traversed the tripwires and acid bog under Fanny's voiced reminders and swiftly climbed up the hills on the two sides. Another wave of dull footfalls once again traveled into everyone's ears. This time everyone knew that it was sure to be the orc wolf riders chasing in hot pursuit. "Conceal yourself well and prepare to fight," Han Sha-O called out loudly as everyone carefully hid themselves, planning on giving these orc wolf riders who were used to pillaging, killing, raiding and looting a lesson in blood. Chapter 57, Killing and Robbing. A dust cloud formed in the distance as dull footfalls sounded in everyone's heart like a dull drum. A row of gleaming longswords first came into view, followed one by the sight of the strong orcs' bodies straddled atop their giant wolf mounts. These orc wolf riders had obviously already gone through a round of looting. The bags on the giant wolves beneath them were bulging at the seams. It looked like the shops in the town of Drill had surely been raided until not even a single shingle remained. Perhaps it was because the wolf riders were carrying too many spoils of war, but the speed of the giant wolves beneath had obviously been affected. This was why Beecher and the others who were riding spindly battle steeds had been able to make it here. Behind the giant rock, Han Sha-O gripped a tough and powerful crossbow, calmly focusing at the most stalwart orc who was leading the group. On his side, Fanny was also holding a crossbow and constantly changed the direction she was aiming at, resolute light sparkling in her eyes. It looked like when faced with death, Fanny also knew to steel her heart. Lisa's hands were empty, but she, along with all the other students, had large boulders next to them. These boulders had been placed appropriately by Han Sha-O earlier. All they needed was a strong push to send them rolling, and they were sure to wreak havoc and devastation that was even more frightening than the crossbows. Accompanied by the howls of the giant wolves, a column of more than 10 wolf riders were as swift as the wind and quick as lightning as they finally appeared at the entrance of the passageway. Their speed was ferociously fast, and they hadn't expected that an ambush would be sprung on them. They all swung their longswords and yelled out wildly, spurring on the giant wolves and rushing over. Woo woo woo. Some of the leading wolves had their front legs suddenly checked by the tripwires. As their front legs buckled and lost balance, they emitted desolate howls as the 4 wolf riders, carried forward by their momentum, suddenly flew off the backs of their giant wolves. Pei Papa. The 4 orcs waved their arms wildly as they uncontrollably landed directly into the acid bog in front, landing with resounding dull sounds. The 4 orcs who had landed in the acid bog also emitted ghastly screams similar to their giant wolves. As they wailed like ghosts and howled like wolves, it was as if acid had been poured on their strong bodies. Their flesh, blood, hair and even their clothes were all turned into bloody water and flowed quickly into the acid bog. The 4 orc wolf riders had turned into 4 enormous skeletons within the span of a brief moment. These 4 orc wolf riders were only the first ones to be so unlucky. 3 more wolf riders behind them were unable to stop their charge in time and also flew into the acid bog. They too turned into 3 skeletons in the blink of an eye. This acid bog is worthy of the title of advanced necromancy. Alright, Master Fanny, you're amazing. You must teach me this magic when we make it back to the academy, Han Sha-O said in low excitement to Fanny upon seeing that the acid bog was so malicious. However, he suddenly realized that Fanny's face was ghastly white after he'd finished speaking and noticed that her gaze towards the acid bog wasn't quite right. He used his body to bump into Fanny and asked again, Master Fanny, is everything alright? Fanny abruptly recollected her senses after being bumped by Han Sha-O and said frantically, no, nothing. This is the first time I've tried casting this acid bog magic ever since I mastered it, and I really hadn't thought that this magic would be so pernicious. Just as Han Sha-O and Fanny were talking, the 10 or so orc wolf riders had all crashed into each other in chaos and confusion because the fronts had abruptly hauled on the reins, stopping their giant wolves, whereas the wolf riders in the back couldn't halt their charge. A few orcs fell off their giant wolves due to the impact, but this way the tripwires and the acid bog lost their purpose. The orcs attempted to regain their footing and formation as they called out in the din of voices and in the midst extremely crowded panic, Gil. At this moment Han Sha-O suddenly suddenly gathered his strength and roared out loudly. Lisa and the others had already busily sharpened their weapons and were itching for action. When they heard Han Shuo's shout, they too yelled out raucously as they pushed the giant boulders beside them down the hill. More than 10 boulders leveraged a momentum that had an imposing manner which flared up at the skies and alternately rolled or flew down at the orc wolf riders below, accompanied by enormous rumbling sounds. Suddenly the orc wolf riders who had been the hunters became the prey instead. Those rolling large boulders became murder weapons that took lives and swiftly reaped the lives of the orcs. The orcs were already crowded like sardines and hadn't had the chance to properly reorganize their formation again. Faced with a descent of giant boulders, they immediately paid a heavy price. 4 giant rocks rained down on them and directly smashed 6 orcs and their giant wolf steeds into a blood mess. The rest of the large boulders followed the downhill slope of the hill with a ferocious momentum. When they crashed into the wolf riders, strings of agonized shouts and wails sounded out. When this wave of giant rocks had finished, another 15 wolf riders had died immediately. Another 10 or so had been drawn into the chaos and suffered injuries of varying magnitudes. As these orcs screamed out in panic and fright, they suddenly discovered that the way back was also blocked off by large rocks. Many figures suddenly revealed themselves on the sides of the hill slopes afterwards and were accompanied by curses and volleys of crossbow bolts and magic attacks. Crude and barbaric orcs, die, all of you. On the other side, Irene from the Light Major had stood up on the side of the hill and cursed in a low voice with a face full of disgust. She began chanting light magic afterwards and started attacking the orcs with Beecher. It looks like they had finally found a target to vent their frustrations on after facing such relentless pursuit from the wolf riders. At this moment there were still 30 or so orc wolf riders who were still alive in the passageway. However, these wolf riders had to face the various magic attacks from the 2 sides of the hills. Wielding his crossbow, Han Shuo would shoot calmly as soon as he'd focused on an orc. As long as those orcs were hit by Han Shuo's crossbow bolt, they would still fall down in the short term. Even if they hadn't suffered a hit to a vital organ, they would never stand up again. How come the orcs that you've hit all never stand up again even if they've only suffered a grazing shot? The ones I've hit, as long as I haven't hit a crucial part, suffer only minor discomfort. On the side, Fanny creased her brow and asked in confusion after observing the situation for a bit. Hey, that's a given. I took some time earlier to sprinkle some poison dust on my quiver of crossbow bolts. They're absolutely done for if even a tiny bit gets on them. Han Shuo accurately shot and killed another orc and explained faintly as if nothing was amiss. Fanny started when she heard his words and then angrily pointed at Han Shuo, saying viciously, You're a bit despicable, alright. Where did you learn such evil methods? We can't use poisoned arrows even if 2 countries fight. This is an unwritten rule of the profound continent. Shrugging, Han Shuo said diffidently, This is a fight between life and death. Being despicable has nothing to do with it. Killing them with the lowest price possible is the correct way. You adhere too stubbornly to outdated rules and ideas. Yes, Brian is right. These damned orcs burn, killed, looted and raided in the town of Zhou. They take advantage of us every winter to raid along the borders of the empire. There's no need to talk about any rules with them. Off on the side, Lisa suddenly interjected at this moment, obviously siding with Han Shuo's methods. HMPH, you 2 brats are both lily-livered. No wonder you've become close. Brian, I'll let it go this time. You can't tell anyone what you've done once you return to the Empire, and you can't do so in the future. Otherwise, if anyone finds out, they're sure to send armed forces to suppress you. Fanny rolled her eyes at both of them and suddenly admonished them severely. Han Shuo understood Fanny's good intentions. The poison powder sold in the town of Zhou were all for the purpose of being used against the savage and violent magical creatures in the dark forest. Ordinarily no one would dare use it against enemies like this in broad daylight. However, Han Shuo only listened to Fanny's reminders and was still quite disdaining internally. If it came down to the wire and his life was endangered, he would certainly still throw caution to the winds and use even more despicable methods. Under the attacks of crossbow bolts and various magics, the remaining arc wolf riders could only use their crossbows to attack the ambushers on the sides of the hills. However, Han Shao and the others had fully occupied the advantage of land and numbers. Under the continual onslaught of attacks, the orc wolf riders fell one by one into puddles of blood, obviously dead as a doornail. When there were only 5 wolf riders left, they finally started to be afraid. The giant wolves were unable to climb past the giant rocks, so the orcs jumped down from the giant wolves, even giving up all the resources in the bags on the wolves' bodies. They started retreating without a care for anything else. Oh no, they're getting away. If they escape, there are sure to be more wolf riders that come by. Everyone chase after them. Han Shao's facial expression changed drastically upon seeing this situation and hastily yelled loudly, but his body remained where it was standing. Everyone panicked after Han Shao had spoken and rushed down from the slope, frantically chasing the fleeing orcs. The 3 warriors that had been hiding ran the fastest, racing down the rocky slope like they were on flat ground. They sped quickly after them with a group of mages following them. Beecher was at the head, as well as Jean Bach and some other necromancy students. They all raised their staffs and ran out. Just as Fanny poked out tentatively with her body and was about to run out from behind the giant rock, Han Shao suddenly reached out and abruptly wrapped his arm around Fanny's waist in a hug. He asked in a low voice, "Is so dangerous? Why are you going?" Fanny's slender waist was suddenly wrapped by Han Shao's arm, causing her entire body to go numb. She turned her head to see that the other necromancy students who were also about to walk out were all looking oddly at her, particularly Lisa. She seemed to be repressing anger. Fanny blanked and grew agitated when she recollected her wits. A red blush flew onto her face and she began struggling fiercely, saying angrily, "What are you doing? Hurry and let go of me. Why are you holding me back? They won't miss us, and don't we have more important things to do right now?" Han Shao released his grasp and chuckled. "What else could be more important?" Fanny and the others all asked, perplexed. "Collect the spoils of war. The resources in those bags on the giant wolves are all dazzling gold coins when brought to a city in the empire." Han Shao laughed heartily as his body had already quickly dashed down from the mountain. Fanny, Lisa and the others were dumbfounded. They lost their hesitation when they saw that a couple other smart strangers were likewise rushing downhill. They all cried out happily and ran to the fallen wolf riders to collect the spoils of war with nary a thought for their composure or demeanor. Chapter 58. The function of skeletal warriors. Souls of the fallen soldiers, heed the Dark Herald's call and reveal your existence. Han Shao suddenly started chanting a magical incantation as he ran towards the passageway. An ordinary skeletal warrior appeared in the passageway after his incantation had finished. Upon seeing the skeletal warrior materialize, Han Shao immediately concentrated his mental strength and gave a command: "Rob them." This skeletal warrior wasn't the one that Han Shao had refined with magical yuan. Its speed and strength paled far in comparison to the little skeleton. Its bones even creaked and rubbed against each other when it moved. The ink-black little skeleton with 7 bone spurs had caused too much of a disturbance in the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. If anyone were to find out that he had been the one to summon the little skeleton, it was bound to cause a string of trouble for him. Therefore Han Shao didn't dare let the little skeleton appear at this moment. "Everyone hurry, otherwise all the items will be taken by someone else." The ones who'd stayed behind included Irene from the Light Major. When she noticed that Han Shao and the others had raced down, she immediately called out and followed. On the Necromancy Major side, Fanny, Lisa and the others first started when they saw Han Shao summon a skeletal warrior and then quickly recollected their wits. They bore expressions of glee and also started summoning skeletal warriors. More than 10 skeletal warriors were abruptly summoned by Fanny, Lisa and the others. Under the commands from their mental strength, the skeletal warriors all reached out their bony hands and began to pick up the giant bags from the ground. The resources within the wolf riders' bags had all been obtained through previous raids. Now that the orc wolf riders were all dead, these bags lacked a master and nationally became free game for whoever grabbed it first. On Han Shao's side, the skeletal warriors lacking in battle strength were finally of some use. Although their speed was slow, a bag still dangled from the hands of every skeletal warrior. As their masters Han Shao, Fanny, Lisa and the others nationally didn't sit idly by. Everyone had a bag in their hands, and Han Shao had even grabbed 4 bags looking like the cat who ate the canary. Han Shao and the others had salvaged 80% of the loot that the wolf riders had left behind in the passageway. The other strangers had managed to grab the other 20%. Weapons, armor and medicines from the town of Jal were all highly many valuable items. If taken to the Empire and sold there, they were sure to fetch high prices and rich rewards. After commanding the skeletal warriors to line up in neat rows, Han Shao looked at Fanny with a smile. Master Fanny, with these items and our gains from the Dark Forest, I think the school authorities will look at our necromancy major with different eyes when we return to the academy. Fanny's mood was also exceedingly jubilant at this time, and she had long since forgotten Han Shao's earlier insolence. A gleeful expression was displayed on her face as her eyes flicked a glance at Han Shao, saying lightly, "Perhaps not. Many of these things are from the shops of the town of Zhou, although the owners of those shops are now either fleeing or dead. If the Empire were to find out about the origins of these goods, they would confiscate them for sure." Fanny's worries were not without reason. Han Shao thought for a bit and suddenly remembered the merchant Fabian whom he had met in the Dark Forest. When the two had parted ways, Fabian had left a card with Han Shao so that Han Shao could find him and do business. Fabian was a member of the Boost Merchant Guild and should have an appropriate way to properly dispose of the items if they found him. When his thoughts traveled to this point, Han Shao smiled confidently at Fanny and said, "Master Fanny, you need not worry. As long as we make it back to the Empire in one piece, I have ways to dispose of these items which shouldn't leave any traces behind." Fanny looked askance at Han Shao and shook her head afterwards, saying with emotion, "Brian, I realize that I can see through you less and less. How many secrets have you hidden from us? How would you have the methods to dispose of these items?" Chuckling lightly, Han Shao said, "Let's speak of these matters later. I think our first course of action should be how to leave this place and speedily return to the Empire." Just as Han Shao and Fanny were talking, Beecher and the others, including Jean Bach and those from the necromancy major on the other side, had returned from the distance they traveled. Judging from the relieved expressions on their faces, Han Shao knew that the orcs had most likely met their impending doom. Indeed, when Beecher and the others had walked over, he immediately said proudly, "Everyone relax, none of those orcs made it out. We can finally be at ease for a moment." He was halfway through his words when he suddenly looked around in surprise, exclaiming, "What's going on?" Apart from the corpses of the orc wolf riders and of the giant wolves in the passageway, all the bags had been split up by the remaining people. Particularly on Han Shao and Fanny's side, a row of skeletal warriors each holding a giant bag was especially conspicuous. Fanny was a bit awkward, opened her mouth and didn't know what to say. Finally, in her agitation, she couldn't help but glare at Han Shao and indicate that Han Shao should respond. Walking forward as if nothing had happened, there wasn't a trace of awkwardness on Han Shao's face. He put down the two bags on his body and called out to the unfamiliar mercenaries, warriors and mages who had just returned from afar. He smiled faintly. "These are all spoils of battle. Brave fighters, come over and take some. Everyone will go their own separate way soon, but we've just repelled the orcs together just now, so let these items be a memento of our battle." "Sure, all right." The 10 or so adventurers who had returned all cheered simultaneously and ran over excitedly, adeptly picking through the resources in the bags. Beecher and some of the other light major students had been about ready to join in their ranks when they saw Irene and the others also held stuffed bags in their hands. They started and began walking over to Irene. "Little fellow, you're a swell friend. If you ever require the services of our Battle Wolves Mercenary Company in the future, don't hesitate to speak up." Hey, I'm very happy to become friends with you. If you need any medicines in the future, just come find me." These people all chatted and laughed in high spirits when they poked through the items as numerous cards with contract information made their way into Han Shao's hands. "Master Fanny, why are we giving those items over to them? What's wrong with Brian?" A necromancy student, Athena, was watching Han Shao's open bags with a look of pain as she asked huffily. "His methods are absolutely correct. If we swallow all these resources ourselves, these people won't gain anything at all and will be sure to report this matter to the Empire. Perhaps they might even think of robbing us in their anger. We'd be in dire straits then. Brian has taken out only a small portion right now for them to choose what they will. Doing so also drags them down with us and shuts everyone's mouth. They don't have space rings and can't summon skeletal warriors like us for manual labor, so they can't take much at all. In the end, we still benefit the most, and he's also won the friendship of these adventurers. The Brian of now is truly becoming stronger and stronger." Fanny's beautiful eyes had continually been focused on Han Shao-O's figure, who was talking and laughing with the adventurers as she explained to the perplexed Athena. He's becoming more and more mysterious. I wonder where he's learned all these random bits of knowledge, and his knowledge actually has some use. Lisa looked at Han Shao, remembering the secret way he taught her to round out her chest, and whispered with a hint of emotion, "Alright, since everyone's taken their pick, let's split up now. I won't be shy if there are any ways in which I need your help in the future, haha." Han Shao was chattering happily with an air of familiarity on the other side. The 4 large bags on his body were basically empty. These mercenaries and adventurers had all more or less benefited some and gained items they needed. As they looked at Han Shao, they felt that he looked incredibly pleasing to the eye. Everyone left one by one after finally exchanging a round of pleasantries. Beecher and the others also left, carrying their loot after coming by and thanking Fanny. Jean finally spoke up in wistful regret when there was only Han Shao and the others left in the area. "I would have stayed had I known earlier. If we hadn't left, then the bags in the hands of the light majors would be ours for sure." Fanny had no comment for Jean's regret, and suddenly felt in that moment that even though he had quite a few years on him, his intelligence seemed to not even measure up to Han Shao's. An involuntary wave of contempt grew in her heart. "Right, what should we do now?" Fanny's eyes looked at Han Shao, and the question came naturally out of her mouth. Raising his head to look at the vast Nerlin River, Han Shao thought for a moment and said slowly, "There are a few towering trees in the canyon below. There are various sharp weapons in our bags and a few tinsel bundles of rope. We'll be able to swiftly construct wooden rafts if we fell a few trees. We'll be able to travel the Nerlin River with the rafts and directly make it to Belphaser City." "I see, then why didn't you tell the others just now?" Jean suddenly asked upon hearing Han Shao's words. "What business is it of mine if they want to leave? Besides, when they leave, they'll be able to draw the orcs' attention away from us, decreasing our danger. Isn't this good?" Han Shao smiled faintly and explained matter-of-factly. Fanny, Jean and the others were all dumbfounded by his words and privately reflected that Han Shao was indeed different now. When he had been conversing and laughing happily with others, he'd been inwardly plotting against them already. Jean, Bach and Bella suddenly all looked at each other, thinking of what they'd done to Han Shao in the past. A chill simultaneously gripped their hearts. Chapter 59, Gifting you a necklace with the aid of the dark creatures. The operation of felling trees to construct wooden rafts only took half a day under Han Shao's command before it was fully complete. 5 wooden rafts and 10 wooden oars all entered the water with the efforts of the skeletal warriors. Everyone boarded the wooden rafts after all 13 bags had been placed securely on them and started rowing down the Nerlin River with oars in hand. Han Shao, Fanny and Lisa were all on one raft, and Fanny had summoned a zombie warrior to row. The 3 of them lounged leisurely on the sturdy wooden platform, admiring the view of the Nerlin River in a satisfied manner. It was already dusk, and the glow of sunset painted the sky. The deep blue waters of the Nerlin River were calm, and a few bold fish leapt out to draw silver lines on the water surface. The towering trees in the distance were covered with leafy boughs, and a few unknown insects called out happily, putting everyone into a quiet and calm state of mind. As Fanny and Lisa chattered and laughed quietly, admiring the view on all sides, Han Shao sat cross-legged on the wooden raft with his eyes closed, silently training his magical yuan, not giving up even a single second that could be used to strengthen and reforge his body, continuously opening up the passages in his body. Fanny and Lisa originally had a belly full of questions for Han Shao, but they didn't disturb him when they realized that he had closed his eyes and wasn't speaking. They actually felt moved by how studious Han Shao was, thinking that it was no wonder he'd improve so quickly in such a short amount of time. Their beautiful eyes occasionally landed on Han Shao's body, discussing something in low voices. It seemed that their topic of discussion must have certainly involved Han Shao. After a long period of silence, Han Shao abruptly opened his eyes and looked around. When he felt that the wooden raft had shuddered, he discovered that the raft had made it across the Nerlin River and arrived in a lush area thick with shrubbery and trees. Fanny and Lisa giddily directed the dark creatures to move the spoils of battle from the wooden raft onto the shore. When Jean and company were all present and accounted for, everyone cheered and used mental strength to command the dark creatures rushing towards Balthazar City after the direction had been set. After walking for 2 days straight, the crew finally arrived at Balthazar City. They first found a large hotel and immediately began to shower and change, feasting on delicacies to their heart's content and retiring happily for the night. Han Shao-Oh's treatment was now vastly different from what it had been when they'd first headed into the dark forest. He naturally enjoyed the most noble treatment and shared his room with no one. Everyone had even undertaken the task of moving the resources to the hotel's specialized vault with their own hands. No one dared to let Han Shao do it. The next day early in the morning, Fanny lived next to Han Shu and he knocked on her door as soon as he'd gotten up. "Who is it?" Fanny's lazy voice sounded from within the room. "It's me," Han Shao responded. "Oh, wait a minute. I'll open the door for you after I've finished washing up." Fanny opened her door after a while, wearing a thin white silk robe. The long soft robe thoroughly accentuated her slender and well-endowed body. Her hair was messy and she lazily flicked a glance at Han Shao, moving aside to let him in. She asked, "What are you doing here so early in the morning?" Greedily staring his fill at Fanny, Han Shao automatically sat at the round table after closing the door. He smiled and said, "Master Fanny, I was thinking last night that the loot we hold is still too conspicuous in our hands. I wanted to come discuss with you how to dispose of it. It'd also be a good thing if we disposed of these resources sooner. We're not merchants and can't very well bring these items back to the school with us, but these items come from the town of Zhou. If we're discovered by others, not only will we not receive any gold coins, but we may be in trouble as well. What should we do?" Fanny's beautiful brows were creased faintly as she spoke after thinking for a while. "If we had a space ring, we'd be able to resolve this problem." "Master Fanny, although space rings are precious, there's still got to be a price for them. How much would a regular smaller space ring cost?" "Typically only space archmages have the ability to refine a space ring. The materials needed to refine a space ring are also quite precious, therefore the prices for space rings are all quite high. Even a space ring that is of a slightly inferior quality will run for at least 1 or 2,000 gold coins. It isn't something that just anyone can afford, so you'd best not think these random thoughts." "Master Fanny, as an adept mage, most of your necromancy students are from noble families, so how come you don't have even a space ring?" Hey, although I'm an adept mage, I rarely leave the academy under normal circumstances. My income every year is only a few hundred gold coins, so where would I have the spare change to purchase a space ring?" "The necromancy major is the weakest major. If these students all came from large noble families, then they wouldn't join the necromancy major. Besides, they haven't graduated yet. Why would their families buy a space ring for them?" Han Shao nodded and basically understood the gist of things after Fanny's explanation. It looked like the necromancy students and teachers were all paupers. No wonder they were all so excited when faced with this batch of resources. "So that's the case. A space ring costs 1 or 2,000 gold coins. Hey, looks like I should get a space ring first." Han Shao thought about the 2,000 gold coins saved in his crystal card, rubbed his chin for a while as he mused, then spoke as if deep in thought. Rolling her eyes at Han Shao, Fanny was out of sorts. "What gold coins would you have as an errand slave? If you had that much money, would you have been sold and become an errand slave for the necromancy major for 6 years?" Chuckling, Han Shao said, "Times have changed. Who says I'll be poor forever? Don't worry, I have my ways to get a space ring." When he had finished saying these words, Han Shao surreptitiously looked to the left and right under Fanny's astonished eyes and took out an agate necklace studded with a ruby. The necklace sparkled with a faint red hue and the ruby was glittering and translucent, an obviously valuable gemstone. "Master Fanny, this is for you." Han Shao saw that Fanny was staring at the necklace in his hands, entranced. He laughed lowly and gave the necklace to Fanny. At first she was abruptly joyful and then blushed hotly. When she'd recovered herself, she hastily shrank back and said, I can't accept it." "Right, where did you get this?" "From the Orc Wolf Rider's bags, of course." I have sharp eyes and nimble fingers and saw that a bag was sparkling with red light and thus, discovered this agate and ruby necklace. I thought that since Master Fanny is such a beautiful person, if you were to wear this necklace it would be sure to display you in an even more charming and alluring light. So I put it away to give specifically to you." Han Shu's expression was quite normal as he spoke lightly. "This item is too precious, I can't have it, you keep it for yourself." Fanny's beautiful face was flushed red as her beautiful eyes stared closely at the necklace, but her mouth stammered words of refusal. It looks like that although she greatly liked it, she hadn't fully lost her reason. "Take it, I have no use for it as a man. Besides, you've taken care of me all these years and I've been very thankful to you all along. I finally have the chance to repay you. I'd be very sad if you rejected it." Han Shuo was quite serious as his normal silly honest look had disappeared. He spoke quite resolutely. "I really can't. You already saved me last time and you've helped me a great deal along the way. How could I accept your things? Although last time in the pool you..." Fanny rambled a bit as she seemed to remember Han Shuo's mischief at the pool. Her face flushed a delicate and charming scarlet as she flung an eye roll at Han Shuo. Her beautiful figure almost lured Han Shuo's soul away. His thoughts racing, Han Shuo hastily stood up with a strong sense of righteousness. He smiled. "You must accept this or I will always feel ashamed and uneasy. I have other matters to attend to. Good day." Han Shuo didn't wait for Fanny to deny him again after he'd spoken and directly pulled open the door to leave. His footsteps gradually faded away into the distance. Fanny was panicking in her heart as her eyes landed on the agate and ruby necklace. Her expression was indescribably odd. Her eyes would be resolute one second and tender the next. Then her face would flush angrily as another complex emotion continuously played out on her face. Chapter 60. We also have a space ring. This space ring. Where did you get it? Fanny looked askance at Han Shuo and asked in shock. "I bought it." Han Shuo responded faintly and glanced at the necromancy students whose eyes were green, full of jealousy and admiration. He added, "I bought it for 1800 gold coins in the city's magical items shop." "This space ring can hold up to a small room's worth of items." "Of course I knew that you bought it, but I'm asking how you came about 1800 gold coins?" Fanny's astounded expression remained as she glared fiercely at Han Shuo in question. Apart from Fanny, all the other teachers and students of the necromancy major were also present. All of their minds short-circuited as they couldn't quite comprehend why Han Shuo suddenly had so much money. Did you sell all the spoils that we looted?" Bella blinked for a moment, suddenly remembered something and exclaimed softly. She hastily went through the battle loot that they had stored in the room. Snorting coldly, Han Shuo flung a disdainful look at Bella, mocking her. "Then you need to take a good look to see if I've filled my own pocket with public funds." "Huh. All 13 bags are still here untouched. Do you have eyes or not? Then where did your gold coins come from?" Jean was also looking oddly at Han Shuo, his eyes roving greedily over the space ring on the index finger of Han Shuo's left hand, thinking, "I'm a necromancy teacher and I can't afford a space ring. Is there any logic left in this world if you, an errand slave, has one before even me? That's not the point. I have a space ring now, so take inventory of all the items in the bags and I'll put them away. When we get back to the academy I'll be in charge of selling it and then we'll distribute the gold coins after we get them." Han Shuo smiled a deep and mysterious smile and said faintly to Jean, "Master Fanny, what is your opinion?" Jean paused, turned his head to look at Fanny and asked her opinion. Let's do it this way then. Brian's accomplishments have been the greatest in us being able to grab these items. Since he has a way to dispose of them, let's do it according to what he's said. After we receive the gold coins, Brian gets 40% and we can split the rest evenly." Fanny mused for a moment and proposed with a creased brow, "Why is it that he gets 40%? We also put our effort forth too." Bach immediately raised faint dissent upon hearing Fanny's words. Indeed, he's just an errand boy, so he shouldn't receive so many gold coins." Bella had finished counting inventory and hastened to assent. Scratching his head, Han Shuo wore an honest smile as he raked his gaze over the two. He chuckled. "Then your meaning is?" Bach and Bella had met many troubles at Han Shuo's hands during this entire expedition and had long since understood that Han Shuo's dumb honest exterior was just a facade. His methods against enemies were brutal and cruel, and Bach and Bella had long since witnessed them. Seeing the honest expression appear on his face again, the two of them felt their scalps go numb and stammered, not daring to say much. Alright Brian, don't scare them. Then it's decided. If it weren't for Brian, you guys wouldn't even be alive at this point. Besides, we were the ones who gained these resources. You guys all went to chase after the orc wolf riders and didn't do anything. You're the ones with the least right to speak. Fanny rolled her eyes at Han Shao first, then placed her hands on her waist and lectured Bach and Bella with an arrogant air. Since this is the case, I'll store these items into the space ring first. We'll hire horses to directly head towards Zajoski City. I've asked around and the orc wolf riders seem to have left after ravaging and pillaging all the nearby villages. I think we shouldn't run into any further danger. Han Shao swept his gaze at the assembled and spoke lazily. When Han Shao saw that Fanny, Jean and the others had all nodded in agreement, he released a tendril of mental strength and activated the space ring. With Han Shao using his two hands afterwards, the 13 bags all disappeared one by one into thin air. The blue space ring on his left hand flashed with blue light 13 times. Under the admiring and envious gazes of the necromancy students and teachers, Han Shao stored the battle loot into the space ring. He discovered that after storing 13 bags, the low-level space ring was already at max capacity and could no longer store anything else. The group of people took out more gold coins afterwards, rented a few battle steeds and left Balthazar City. They made it back to Zajoski City in the span of 2 days. Using the transportation matrix in Zajoski City, everyone returned to the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force in the city of Asen. Gazing upon the familiar buildings in the academic surroundings, a joyous feeling of being reborn again arose in the hearts of the necromancy teachers and students as they'd been delivered from great danger. Brian, you no longer have to deal with the errand duties of the necromancy major anymore. I'm going to have a talk with the school authorities right now to dispel your status as an errand boy and a slave, allowing you to become a true necromancy magic apprentice. Fanny spoke to Han Shao after she'd gotten over her elation of returning to the academy. Han Shao's heart also gave an ecstatic lurch upon hearing Fanny's guarantee, and a faint smile made its way onto his face. After the trials of the Dark Forest, Han Shao's entire being had undergone a significant change. He had a deep appreciation for the fact that his errand boy and slave status would directly impact his actions in the future. Now that he could not only dispel both of these statuses but truly become a student, he was naturally elated. Understood, Master Fanny. I will dispose of the resources within the space ring. I'll come back here to find you after I resolve all of these matters. He smiled at Fanny and then thought for a moment, fishing out 3 gold coins from his pocket and giving them to Lisa. If you see Jack, please give him these gold coins for me. Lisa looked oddly at Han Shao, put away the gold coins and said, looks like you're pretty good to that little fatty. I really wonder how you got so much money all of a sudden. 3 gold coins are enough for Jack's family expenses for a year. You're quite generous. No matter if it was the Brian from before or the current Han Shao, they'd always been on good terms with little fatty Jack. Now that Han Shao had money, the first target of his charity would be Jack. The 3 gold coins weren't much to Han Shao now, but would undoubtedly be a huge sum for Jack. This would also count as repayment for Jack's help during these days. After leaving the academy, Han Shao took out the card that Fabian had given to him and hired a carriage to travel to the southern part of Asen, heading towards the address on the card, Boost Merchant Guild. The carriage traveled for quite a while before stopping. The groom's voice sounded from outside. Walking down from the carriage, Han Shao handed over 2 silver coins and sent the groom on his way. He then took in the Boost Merchant Guild. 2 warriors wielding long spears stood on either side of the dark black metal doors. A row of houses towered in the distance, and it was apparent from the presentation that wealthy people lived inside. Kid, what are you doing sneaking around here? One of the guards in front of the doors called out a bit impatiently when he saw Han Shao looking around randomly. This is the Boost Merchant Guild, right? I'm here to call upon Mr. Fabian. Han Shao blinked, swept his gaze over the guards and responded faintly. Fabian? Haven't heard of him. Does such a person exist within our merchant guild? The guard had a stony face as he asked the other guard. I think so, and he seems to work work for the young miss. He'd just returned from the dark forest a few days ago and made quite a large haul. The other guard responded. Pausing, the first guard looked suspiciously at Han Shao and weighed him from head to toe with a few hints of contempt appearing in his eyes. He asked arrogantly, "And what business do you have with him?" "I'm here to talk business." Because his status as an errand slave had yet to be lifted, and the fact that they had hurried without stopping to return to the academy, the errand boy uniform that Han Shao was wearing was tattered and in pieces. It was obvious that he was being looked down upon. "Business, haha. That's funny. Do the likes of you look like you're here to do business?" "Our Boost Merchant Guild is a famous guild in the Empire. I think you must be in the wrong place." The guard laughed loudly and jeered. Just as Han Shao was about to become angry, an ornate carriage suddenly stopped in front of the guild doors. After two tall bulky warriors dismounted, a young beauty stepped out from the horse carriage. The girl was tall and slender, with a head of brown hair, wearing a dress embedded with diamond fragments. She looked classically elegant and gorgeous, but a faint trace of aloofness was on her stunning face. She had the naturally proud demeanor of someone born to a higher station in life. "What is the matter?" The girl stared coldly at the guards after she'd gotten out, speaking with a cool voice that was pleasing to the ear. "Young miss, he says he wishes to see Master Fabian. I felt that he was suspicious because he was looking around surreptitiously and is also wearing tattered cheap clothing. I was questioning him." One of the guards bowed politely and explained, "You know Fabian?" This stunning girl creased her brow and flung a glance at Han Shao, asking distantly. Han Shao's eyes had been boldly roving over the beautiful girl's body when he abruptly came to himself after he heard the question. He immediately nodded. "Yes, I conducted a deal with Mr. Fabian in the dark forest. My name is Brian, and I'm sure Mr. Fabian will remember me." "Brian, I think I've heard Fabian mention you. Since this is the case, why don't you come in with me?" She didn't look at Han Shao again after she finished speaking and just walked inside. Han Shao glared fiercely at the two guards at the doors and said in a low voice, "Idiots with no eyes." He then laughed and swiftly walked inside.